The sun was still rising, brushing the mangroves with gold, when the fishermen set out onto the water. It was a day like any other, hot, slow, and thick with the scent of mud and salt. The river mouth, where the fresh water met the sea, rolled quietly beneath their wooden boats, the surface only occasionally broken by darting fish or a curious turtle head. Milo, the oldest among them, sat cross-legged near the stern of his canoe, tossing his net in wide, practiced arcs. His son, Raffi, barely 16, handled the oar with both pride and clumsiness. Behind them, three other boats bobbed lazily, their owners whistling, baiting lines, telling old stories that floated over the water like smoke. And then, the birds went quiet. It happened slowly, not all at once. The song of a kingfisher stuttered, then stopped. A heron flew low, awkwardly, toward the treetops. And on the far bank, where the muddy shallows sloped into deeper current, something else moved. A ripple, a shape, a crocodile. Huge and dark, its armored back just barely breached the water as it swam, fast, away from the shore. Not hunting, not prowling, fleeing. Milo noticed it first. He squinted, shaded his eyes, then stood slowly. That's not right. Raffi followed his gaze. Is it hunting? Milo shook his head. No. He's scared. The croc lunged out of the water, half beached itself on a rock, then rolled violently and launched back into deeper current, heading upriver, away from the sea. And then, the air changed. The smell of salt thickened. The tide, which had been flowing gently outward, suddenly reversed, pulling harder than it should have, dragging silt and reeds and tiny shells back toward the mouth. Milo felt it in his feet before he understood it in his mind. He turned, shouting to the others, Back! Paddle back! Something's wrong! But even as he said it, a low rumble started to grow beneath the surface of the world. Not thunder, not boats, not man-made. It was older than any engine, deeper than any drum. Raffi froze, listening. Behind them, the crocodile disappeared beneath the waves, as if it knew it was too late to run farther. The river didn't rise, it receded. Dozens of meters of exposed mudflats peeled back toward the ocean, revealing crabs and debris and the slow skeletons of old boats long buried. And then, on the horizon, something shimmered like glass. A line. Wide. White. Growing. Milo dropped the net and screamed, Tsunami! The water was no longer water. It became something else. Something alive and wide and rumbling. As Milo's shout echoed across the mangrove-lined bay, the horizon cracked open into a thunderous wall of white. It wasn't the towering movie kind of tsunami, not yet. It was worse. A silent rise, pulled like muscle from beneath the sea. Milo threw himself to the edge of the boat, gripping Raffi's shoulders. Row. Hard. Now the boy didn't question. He turned, dug the oar deep, and heaved. Behind them, the wave line advanced with terrible grace. Not a single crash, not a single roar yet. Just pressure. A trembling beneath the hull. The distant groan of earth grinding water forward. The crocodile was gone, already far upriver, lost in reeds and bends. But its retreat had been all the warning they'd needed. The other boats finally caught on. Shouts erupted. Wood creaked as men panicked and twisted nets around themselves. One younger fisherman dropped his paddle and leapt into the water to swim. No! Milo bellowed. Stay in the boats! But it was too late. The tide wasn't rising. It was pulling. The swimmer was swept sideways, not backward, dragged in a diagonal current that shouldn't have existed. A rogue whirlpool opened near a cluster of roots and swallowed a clump of reeds whole. Milo's boat veered, oar to oar, against nature's pull. The village still wasn't in sight. Faster, he gasped, sweat slicking his neck. The school, Raffi, we have to warn them. They'll be playing near the bridge. Behind them now, the roar began, distant, like an avalanche inside a tunnel. And then came the birds, hundreds of them. Egrets, herons, black ibises. They erupted from the trees like thrown sheets, screaming, flying inland, away from the shore. Even the sky seemed to dim. Raffi blinked against the sun as a cloud swept overhead. "We're not going to make it." "We will," Milo growled. "We must. Not just us. We've got to get word up the river." The waves struck the first bend far behind them. Trees cracked, something metal crumpled. And the crocodile? Gone into myth again? No one would believe it had known. But Milo knew. He'd seen that cold-blooded instinct for what it was. Not fear. Survival. And if the humans didn't match it, they'd be gone before anyone ever knew why the birds fell silent and the water ran backward. Upstream, the village of Tengaru went about its midday rhythm in lazy, contented ignorance. Children chased dragonflies near the old footbridge. Two women squatted by the laundry rocks, pounding cloth while humming in rhythm with the cicadas. A transistor radio played fuzzy folk songs from a window ledge, while smoke curled from fish cookers, and the scent of roasted cassava wafted through the air. The river looked lower than usual, yes, but no one noticed. No one thought to ask why the tide had receded so far, so fast. Then came the birds. They arrived all at once, as if the trees themselves had thrown them into the air. They cut low over rooftops, skimmed the river path, darted inland like fire fleeing its own smoke. Old Nana Jaya, who sat in a wooden chair carving spoon handles, frowned and looked up. "That's not right," she muttered. Next came the frogs. Their croaks rose in a frantic, tangled chorus, echoing from swamp to slope like 100 broken clocks ticking offbeat. A few leapt across the village paths. Others stayed hidden, but their panic painted the air. Still, most didn't see it. Didn't believe it. Not until Raffi and Milo's canoe rounded the bend at full speed, nearly capsizing as it rammed the small jetty, and Raffi leapt out barefoot, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Get away from the water! A wave is coming! A giant wave!" He didn't sound brave, he sounded mad. The children stopped. One girl pointed. "Is he bleeding?" Milo stumbled next to him, breathless, soaked, eyes wide. "Tsunami," he gasped. "I saw it. It's coming. Minutes, maybe less." That did it. People froze. Then Nana Jaya stood, louder than anyone, and said, "Move your feet or bury your children." Now it was like striking a match. Mothers grabbed toddlers. A man dropped a sack of fish. A dog barked as its leash snapped. People began to run, up the hill, into the trees, away from the water. Milo turned back toward the river, chest heaving, and for a moment saw it, a shimmer on the far horizon, past the mangroves, a strange white line across the world, too straight, too tall, too fast. The crocodile had known. It had been trying to warn them all. And now, it was up to them to outrun the ocean. The sound hit first. Not like thunder, not like a train. It was lower than that, like the earth growling beneath its breath. A bass tone so deep it rattled the leaves and made the sky feel heavier. Then came the wind, sucked from the bay like air fleeing a scream. And finally, the wave. It wasn't a single wall of water. It was a bulge, a surge so massive and fast, it looked like the ocean had stood up and started to run inland. From the village hilltop, Raffi turned in time to see the water lift the first fishing shack into the air like a child's toy, then splinter it into kindling before dragging it under. The footbridge exploded into rope and timber. The riverbanks became claws, tearing trees out by the roots, sweeping banana stalks into brown, roaring chaos. "Faster!" Milo shouted, pushing a stunned child up the slope. "Don't look back!" The ground beneath them quaked as the wave rolled forward, swallowing the jetty where they had landed just moments before. Someone screamed behind them, a fisherman, swept off his feet as he tried to reach his boat. It flipped end over end, the net still dangling from its mast like a torn flag. In the chaos, a dog barked wildly, tied to a post by the cooking hut. Raffi paused, meowed for one terrifying second, and looked at the animal, straining, choking, eyes wild. He ran, untied the knot with shaking hands, kicked the door open, and the dog bolted past him into the trees. Raffi turned back, just in time to see the water surge toward him. Then, arms grabbed him. Milo yanked him backward, up the slope, behind the last hut. The water slammed into the ground like a hammer, devouring the lower village in an instant. The force of it nearly pulled them both off their feet. But they were high enough, just high enough. The villagers gathered on the ridge, soaked, shaking, clutching one another as they watched their lives, boats, tools, food stores, swept away like leaves. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, breathless and wet, Raffi looked up at his father. "We made it." Milo nodded slowly, eyes scanning the destruction below. "Thanks to a crocodile." The villagers turned. Milo didn't need to explain, because at that moment, everyone remembered the shape moving upstream. Not hunting, not lurking, fleeing, and warning in the only language it had. For nearly an hour, they stayed on the ridge, staring down at what used to be Tengaru. The river no longer looked like a river. It was wide, brown, and angry, full of pieces of lives, broken crates, smashed fishing poles, laundry tubs, even someone's roof drifting sideways like a lost raft. A wooden idol from the shrine bobbed in the eddies, face half submerged, as if it too couldn't believe what had happened. Raffi sat next to Milo, mud streaked across his arms, knees torn, chest heaving with the weight of what he'd seen. The dog he'd saved lay pressed against his side, ears twitching, eyes locked on the water. No one spoke much. Some wept. Others simply stared. Old Nana Jaya, wrapped in a wet shawl, murmured prayers under her breath and scattered rice into the dirt. But Milo was watching something else. The sky, the clouds, the river's direction. "It's too soon for calm," he said aloud. Raffi looked up. "What do you mean?" Milo's brow furrowed. "The sea doesn't strike just once." Around them, villagers shifted uneasily. They remembered the stories, from their grandparents, from the elders, from the temple murals. Tsunamis came like monsters with more than one head. Sometimes 3, sometimes 5. The first wave was only a hand to sweep the door open. The next one took what was left. Just then, the birds, those that had survived, stopped singing again. Raffi felt it in his chest, a pause in the world's rhythm. The dog whined, then stood, ears up. Down in the mangrove fringe, a single tree cracked and fell into the current. And in the distance, past where the old river mouth had once opened to the bay, there it was again. A shimmer, a line, white and wide, coming fast. Raffi stood. "There's more coming," Milo was already shouting. "Higher!" Everyone, climb higher. They weren't alone on the ridge, but now it was clear that even this slope would not be enough. They had minutes, less. The second wave was larger, darker, and it carried everything the first wave broke loose. Logs, boats, barbed wire, a dead buffalo. And silence again gave way to the roar. Raffi grabbed Nana Jaya's hand. She was slow but steady. Behind them, a mother screamed for her child. Someone yelled to save the sacred drum still hidden in the temple. But Milo's voice rose above them all. "Forget what's gone. Save what breathes." And they ran again, higher still, toward the trees, toward the cliffs, toward the only chance they had left. The second wave came like judgment. It struck the ridge not with water, but with weight, dragging trees from the roots, slamming through shrines, hurling corrugated rooftops like blades. The temple bell flew across the air like a bird without wings, crashing into the hillside where just minutes ago children had been sitting, laughing. But by then, the villagers were climbing, hands clutching vines, bare feet bleeding on rocks, faces scraped by thorn and branch. Raffi had never been this far from the river before. The jungle here was denser, darker, alive in a way that felt older than even the sea. It smelled of moss, sap, and something sharp, like lightning waiting to strike. They reached a ledge where trees thinned just enough to see what was behind them. Tengaru no longer existed, only water remained. Deep, swirling water littered with what used to be homes, dreams, and the bones of memory. And the wave kept moving inland, slow but merciless, like a mouth that hadn't finished chewing. Raffi collapsed onto the ground, sucking in humid air. The dog lay beside him, tongue out, eyes wild. Milo helped lift Nana Jaya onto a stone outcrop. She coughed but nodded. "Thank the old spirits," she whispered. "They waited for us." But Milo shook his head. "Not spirits." He pointed into the trees, and every head turned. There, maybe 30 meters ahead, half covered in vines, still and motionless, was the crocodile. Its great back, scarred and ancient, rose like a mossy log. Its eyes, yellow, unblinking, watched them without fear, without welcome, as if to say, "I came this way too." No one moved. It didn't attack. It didn't retreat. It simply sat at the mouth of a narrow trail winding deeper into the forest, a trail that hadn't been walked in generations. Raffi's voice was barely a whisper. "It's showing us where to go." Milo stepped forward slowly, eyes locked with the animals. Then, "We follow." It saw this coming long before we did. And as the wind shifted again, bringing with it the salt and ruin of the ocean, the crocodile stood, turned, and vanished into the green. One by one, the villagers followed. Because when the ocean speaks in silence, and the earth has no voice, sometimes only the oldest instincts remain. The crocodile moved like a shadow, noiseless, steady, almost spectral in the shifting green. Branches snapped under villagers' feet, but not his. Vines brushed their faces. Insects clung to skin and hair. Sweat soaked through clothes. Still, they followed. Not because they trusted the beast, but because it was the only thing in the world that had known what was coming. The trail was narrow, long, swallowed by jungle. But it was deliberate. Every bend felt older than memory, lined by half-sunken stones and rotting stumps carved with symbols none could read. Nana Jaya walked slower now, leaning on Rafi's shoulder. "This was once a sacred path," she whispered. "My grandmother spoke of it. The place the spirits would lead animals during floods." "A sanctuary?" Milo asked, not taking his eyes off the crocodile ahead. "Or a test." They climbed higher. Hours passed. The sounds of water behind them grew distant. But the silence carried something heavier now. Not threat, but awe. As if the jungle had shifted, had accepted them only because they had listened. At last, just before dusk, the crocodile stopped. They emerged into a natural basin, a flat plateau surrounded by tall cliffs and sheltering trees. A trickle of clean water ran from the rocks. Birds called cautiously from the canopy above. And in the middle of the space, beneath hanging moss and filtered sun, stood the ruins of an old stone structure, part temple, part home, long abandoned but intact. Safe. The crocodile didn't look back. It slithered to the edge of the clearing, paused at a mossy stone, one carved in the shape of another crocodile, then slowly disappeared into the undergrowth. Gone. As silently as it had come. The villagers collapsed. Some cried, some prayed, some simply lay staring at the sky, finally still. Milo looked at Raffi, voice hoarse. "We'll rebuild." "Not down there," Raffi said, nodding toward the flooded valley. "Not again." "No," Milo agreed. "This time, we listen first." That night, the survivors of Tengaru slept under the shelter of broken stone and growing stars. They dreamed not of destruction, but of warnings that came with claws and scales, and eyes that saw what humans forgot. That nature always speaks, that the wild always knows, and that even the most feared creatures may be the only ones left trying to save us.